Happy Friday, everyone. John Lorden here with your weekly episode of BrainScratch. Hope everyone had a nice week out there, and thank you so much for joining me here today. Well, this is a story that once we start getting into it, I think many of you out there, especially if you're fans of the old television show Unsolved Mysteries, are going to say, you know what, I remember this. It is a very memorable story. However, once I started looking into it, it became very clear that kind of the popular urban legend version of this story is just repeated time and time again. And trying to find details, even where this actually happened, was really, really tough. Now, thankfully, I didn't give up, and thankfully there were some people, particularly on web sleuths, that had pointed me in the right direction. But I believe this is going to be one of the more comprehensive versions of this story that you're likely to have seen, because there's kind of the short, popular version, and there's what we're doing here today, the BrainScratch version. So let's take a look, starting with this license plate, 49er Hugs. And is this license plate responsible for the death of Dick Hansen? That's today's question on BrainScratch. Let's go ahead and get started, starting at findagrave.com with information about Richard Gerald Dick Hansen. He was born on the 23rd of February, 1955. He died on the 29th of April, 1991 at the age of 36 in Sunnyvale, Santa Clara County, California. He is buried at Oak Hill Memorial Park. Dick Hansen played football at Santa Clara State University. He lived in Santa Clara County most of his life. Dick was murdered in Sunnyvale, California in 1991 by an unknown man who followed him and his friend from a bar. His murder was featured on Unsolved Mysteries. So the best source of information that I was able to find for this case is actually the Mercury News, and these are stories that are part of their archive. You actually have to pay for these stories, so I'm not going to include any of the links down below. I'll have a link to the Mercury News website, but to find these individual stories, all you have to do is search on his name, and then you'll have to pay for access to those stories. But of course, I'm going to cover all the most pertinent details with you right here, right now, starting with this first story published May 1st, 1991. A motorist trailed the 36-year-old son of a prominent attorney from downtown San Jose early Tuesday and shot him to death on a Sunnyvale street. Police said they had no suspects and knew little about what prompted the slaying of Richard G. Hansen, an electronics industry manager who lived in San Jose. But his father, Gerald B. Hansen, said he was told a motorist had upbraided his son and a friend for blocking a mailbox and then followed them onto Interstate 280. Now, I know that sentence is a little clunky the way it's written. Essentially, they were parked and a man pulled up behind them, and it looked like he might have been trying to get to a public mailbox that was available on the street. At least that's what the girl that was with Dick was worried about. So I believe that that's where his father's getting that piece of information. Was that really the motivation of why he would shoot someone? I seriously doubt it. Of course, many of you are probably saying, yeah, John, but a vanity plate that has to do with the 49ers is no reason to shoot someone either. I agree with you, but let's continue here. Sunnyvale Lieutenant Dave Bridges said Richard Hansen and a female friend left Original Joe's on South 1st Street in San Jose and sat for a time in her car nearby. Then, in separate cars, they pulled out about 2 a.m. They noticed a car following as they drove to Interstate 280 toward her Belmont home. The woman told police she was terrified and that she and Hansen tried changing lanes and driving faster, then slower, to shake their pursuer. When they turned onto Highway 85 and then onto Fremont Avenue in Sunnyvale, the other car followed. When they came to a stop on the roadside at Fremont and Bernardo Avenues, the other car pulled in behind. Hansen got out and spoke briefly with the man. Then 2 shots were fired. Hansen, who is divorced and has 2 children, died at 3:10 a.m. in Stanford University Hospital. Bridges declined to divulge the caliber of the bullets or where Hansen was hit, and would not identify the woman because she is the only witness and might be in danger. Bridges said there is no indication the gunman knew Hansen or his friend. "We have no idea why he was tailing them," he said. Bridges described the three cars as a red 1976 Toyota pickup, I believe that's Dick's vehicle, a silver 1985 Lincoln Mark 7 driven by the woman, and a late 1970s American-made two-door sedan, silver or blue, driven by the killer. The gunman was described as 35 to 40 years old. He wore glasses and had very short, dark hair. Hansen said he was told his son was hit in the chest and neck and never regained consciousness. He and the woman had been dating for 3 or 4 months, the father said. We're going to find out later that they had known each other considerably longer than that, but in terms of them being romantic, it seems like they were only together for a few months. And Dick's former wife, Mary Boughton, lives in San Jose with their daughters Julie Hansen, 13, and Kathy Hansen, 11. Hansen and Boughton were divorced about 5 years ago. So let's continue with a different article from Mercury News, this one published the next day, May 2nd, 1991. Richard G. Hansen was a big man who was not the sort to be intimidated by a car following him up the freeway and onto the streets of Sunnyvale in the middle of the night. For one thing, he was a former Santa Clara University football player who stayed in shape and weighed 255 pounds. For another, friends say, he had a knack for reasoning with unreasonable people. But neither quality saved Hansen. "We're starting to think it was a complete outsider, a stranger to both," said Gerald B. Hansen, Richard's father and a well-known San Jose attorney. "It could be anybody." "I'm not sure there is a best guess," said Detective Don Bacon. "You have to have some kind of motive." Bacon said the woman, who he declined to identify for her protection, told police that neither she nor Hansen were involved in any arguments at Original Joe's or Boswell's. Now, there's another version of this story that has been told on another television show called Dates from Hell, and both the Unsolved Mysteries episode and the Dates from Hell episode heavily feature the woman who they refer to as Jean, the woman that was with Dick that night. And it's kind of told from her perspective. So we certainly have to keep that in mind if you watch either of those. And I'll have links to some YouTube clips of the Dates from Hell episodes and a Amazon clip. If you have Amazon Prime, you can watch the Unsolved Mysteries episode as well, link down below. But there's something very different that is portrayed in the Dates from Hell episode in terms of how they were getting along. Essentially, the Dates from Hell episode goes into the fact that they were kind of off again, on again, off again lovers, and that they had broken up previously due to some type of substance abuse. Now, in the Dates from Hell episode, it's pretty clear that it's alcohol. I'm finding some information in discussion threads that there could have been more to it than just that. But Dick had actually gone through rehab, and this was his first time seeing her after that. And despite the fact that things seemed to be going pretty well, essentially they were going back to her house at the end of the evening, some of the conversation was pretty tough between the two of them at one point. And at least in the Dates from Hell episode, they even depict that he's yelling at her in the restaurant and that he orders a drink, which obviously if you've just come out of rehab is not a great thing. Now, the way they depict it, that conversation de-escalates and she's kind of able to bring him back around and they go on to continue their night and they have a fine time. So, but it is, I just did want to point that out because here they're saying that, first of all, that there was no arguments at either of the locations. And at least according to what she's saying much later, admittedly, there was something that could be construed as an argument. There's another fact here. They put in that the victim hadn't been drinking. And obviously, based on what I've told you and what I saw from the Dates from Hell episode, her story is now that he did at least have one drink in particular. Police also said Hansen didn't drink that night and hadn't had a drink since recently undergoing alcohol rehabilitation. I might understand it if you had a run-in verbally or physically, Bacon said, but it doesn't seem to be that kind of situation. And if we believe what Jean is saying, that there was a bit of a verbal altercation that happened between the two of them. Could this have been someone else in the bar or restaurant that oversaw that, maybe became angry with how Dick was handling her? Maybe that was some motive for him to kind of follow them, and things got out of hand from there when Dick went and confronted him. Possibly. So I just wanted to put that out there. It's tough because we're relying on it. First of all, this case is very, very old. Second, we only have really what I consider three sources. We've got this newspaper, we've got the Unsolved Mysteries episode, and we've got the Date from Hell episode. So we're trying to just parallel all this information, and I'm trying to give you guys the best that I can with this. But let's continue. At this point, police are not saying much more. They say they have no suspects or motive in the shooting. Talk among friends Wednesday was not about the mysteries of the crime, but about the loves of Hansen's life: cycling, sailing, football, SCU, and above all, family. Hansen's two daughters from a marriage that ended in divorce came before all else, said Bradley Mazuka, a close friend who met Hansen in high school. Mazuka said he visited the girls, Julie 13 and Kathy 11, the night after their father was killed. I just sat with them and thought, this is a horrible way to become a grown-up real quick, Mazuka said. There aren't any answers. Friends and family remembered a fun-loving man who enjoyed spending time with people. They talked about how Hansen, who had recently left a job as an electronics manager, had come up with several potential new jobs. And they talked about some changes for the better Hansen, who lived in San Jose, had made. He was the type of guy who would go to the end of the earth for his friends, said Seamus McCracken, a buddy since high school. Dick's parents, the Hansens, are considered prominent in some circles. His father, Gerald Hansen, was a U.S. court commissioner, and he managed JFK's presidential campaign in Santa Clara County. But Barbara and Gerald Hansen, parents of 5, are a down-to-earth couple that have lost a cherished son. Between greeting visitors, Hansen's parents sat under a portrait of Richard at age 3. Gerald touched the cover of an old SCU football program that featured their son, number 69, and broke down. He was just a football player, he said. He won a game ball when he made 15 unassisted tackles against the University of Carolina Davis. He won an award for the most inspirational athlete. He formed a fraternity at SCU. The Hansens remember their son's innocent but devilish side in college, fraternity pranks and capers, the sorts of things that bring down parental wrath at the time, but that brought only smiles and tears on Wednesday. Now, they've put a timeline together here, and I guess the original article actually had a map that was included. All the images have been stripped out of these archive articles, but I've kind of put it back together with Google Maps so we can take a look at what happened here. And they're calling this How a Killer Stalked His Victim. And let me just be clear with you guys, the Dates from Hell episode kind of shows the person that followed them in one of the bars that they were at. We don't have any information to really support that. And they kind of phrase things badly in that episode where some people think that they're saying that Jean is saying that she recognized the guy. We're not sure if she's saying she recognized him from the bar or if she recognized the guy from him being at the car at the first scene where they pulled up near the mailbox and then seeing him later after he pulled up after they got off the freeway. So it's one of those things that's really tough to be clear about. But we can take a look at some of these locations. So at 10 p.m., Hansen meets friend at Original Joe's at San Carlos and First Streets. And then at 11:30, they leave for Boswell's in the Prune Yard at Campbell and South Bascom Avenue. So I've got one map just about these first two locations. Here we see Original Joe's in San Jose. And we see they drive approximately 5 miles to Boswell's, just a bit south of there. Now, after Boswell's, they actually wind up going back to Original Joe's because that's where Dick has left his truck. Minutes later, as they're sitting in the car talking, a car pulls up behind them. When they leave in separate vehicles for her Belmont home, the car follows. So I guess if there was a point where this person was watching them, it probably would have been at Boswell's. I guess potentially they could have been at Original Joe's the original time that they were there, and then followed them to Boswell's and is now following them back. Or potentially the person could have seen them in Original Joe's, saw that they left together, but maybe he saw that they left one of their vehicles and he waited for them to come back. I'm just trying to piece together where he could have seen them. And unfortunately, I don't have very clear information on where this tough conversation happened. The way it's depicted in the episode, I think it's Original Joe's, but they take creative liberty with some of those shows. So it's kind of hard to tell for sure. At 2 a.m., Hansen and the woman drive north on Interstate 280 and then onto Highway 85, headed toward Mountain View. They get off at Fremont Avenue in Sunnyvale and stop about 50 yards away near Bernardo Avenue. So the second map shows, here is Original Joe's again. You can see they jump on the 280. So during this drive, and I'm not sure if it's on the 280 or once they're on the 85, but she's noticed that this guy's following them. She's speeding up, he's speeding up, she's slowing down, he's slowing down. At one point, she says she even slams on her brakes. He's not in the same lane as her. She tries changing lanes, he changes lanes, he's following her. But at one point, she slams on her brakes. He's in the lane next to her, and he slams on his brakes as well. So it really seems like the guy is intent on following her vehicle. And then eventually she catches up. She pulls up alongside of Dick and is trying to yell to him, "Let's go to the police, that guy is still following us." I don't know if Dick doesn't understand it. That's what they say in the episode, that it's just too loud and he doesn't understand what she's saying, or if he just decides he's going to handle it himself. But that's where they get off at Fremont Avenue, and apparently right off of this freeway is where the shooting happens. And something to keep in mind is this is the middle of the night. Even when they're back at the first restaurant where he left his truck, there's no other cars on the street at all. So not a lot of potential for witnesses or people to see what's going on here. But interestingly, where the shooting actually does happen, if we go into the satellite view, you can take a look. There's a lot of homes around here. So if nothing else, I would think that someone could have potentially heard the gunshots. Of course, it is close to a freeway, but I don't know how busy this freeway is at that time of night. So I'd be really surprised if someone in these homes here hadn't heard some of the gunshots from the shooting. Is that ultimately very helpful? I don't know, because we know that that's where he was shot. We have a witness to it. But could someone have seen something from where they were? Possibly. But this exit, Fremont Avenue off of the 85, close to South Bernardo Avenue, which you can see right here. Somewhere around here is where they actually stopped and pulled over, and he confronted the man. And unfortunately, we know the outcome of that confrontation. Continuing on, this is an article from February 16th, 1994, once again from the Mercury News. The woman who saw Dick Hansen, member of a prominent San Jose family, gunned down in the early morning of April 30th, 1991, is determined to bring his killer to justice. A major step in that effort is a segment on NBC's Unsolved Mysteries. The program is to devote up to 10 minutes to a recreation of the slaying, featuring interviews with the woman and Sunnyvale detective Les Richards. Now, in the Unsolved Mysteries episode, they keep her face completely blacked out, so you cannot see her at all. In the Dates from Hell show, they actually show her, but she's pretty obviously wearing a wig. I think she's trying to cover her face quite a bit. It's really, the hair is all over her face, but you can at least get a sense of who she is in the second one. But she's called herself Jean through all this, and according to the information I'm reviewing here, that's not her name. The TV production resulted from 2 years of letters from the woman to Unsolved Mysteries and similar shows, she said in an interview this week. She and Hansen met in 1978 and began a romantic relationship in 1989. So obviously these are people that knew each other for a long period of time. And keep in mind, the story that she's saying, at least in the newer television show, is that their romantic relationship was a little rocky due to the substance abuse issues he was going through. The first thing I wondered when I heard about that was, I wonder how close his divorce is to all this. You know, is that part of why he's drinking so hard or doing whatever he's doing? But his divorce is actually 5 years prior to this occurrence, so I don't know if it's directly related. The woman, who still sees a therapist, has distributed 1,000 flyers announcing the NBC program. If this doesn't work, it doesn't mean I'm quitting, she said. I don't know. I'll think of something. And I really wanted to point out this article as well, because if you look in the conversation threads about this case, a lot of people are wondering, is Jean related to this case in some way? Is she responsible in some way? Did she know the man that shot Dick and she's protecting him for some reason? Is it maybe a boyfriend of hers, maybe an ex-boyfriend? Maybe it was a boyfriend that she had at the time that she didn't let Dick know about, something along those lines. The steps that she took here to get the attention from Unsolved Mysteries, the fact that she said that she's not going to quit, and she obviously doesn't, because she pops back up on another television show literally decades later, telling her story and trying to bring some closure to this case, leads me to believe that her involvement here is probably not a likely scenario. Can't say that I can completely rule it out. But in general, I don't see people taking these kind of steps in this way and working so hard to try to find justice for Dick and his family. But what did she say in these episodes? Let's go ahead and continue at unsolved.com. We've got several quotes from her here. And here is our first picture of the killer. Obviously, she saw him. So there is a police composite sketch done. And this is what the man looked like. You can see he's got the dark glasses and what looks like dark curly hair as well. And of course, to the left here, we have a photo of Dick Hansen. On April 29th, 1991, he asked a friend, who we'll call Jean, to meet him at his favorite hangout. Quote, "He was in a very good mood, very good. He was very happy with where he was. He was very happy with what was going on in his life and where he was headed." And keep in mind, according to the story, he had just gotten out of rehab. And his favorite hangout, I want to point out also, because in the Date from Hell version of this story, he was known at that restaurant. Like, he comes in and, you know, the people that work there know him, the locals know him. There's one depiction of someone that doesn't know him quite properly, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the video as well. But I just want to make it clear that this is a spot where he was kind of known. Now, could that tie into this case in some way? Possibly. Once again, if that person did kind of pick up on their trail at that first restaurant, maybe he was much more aware of Dick and Dick's popularity. I just wanted to put that out there. But Jean said she and Dick left the bar together in her car and drove to where Dick had left his pickup truck. There were no cars at all, and I remarked to Dick, I said, "This is funny. Yours is the only car left on the street." So we were sitting there talking, and this car pulls up behind us. And I looked, and I thought, I don't even think it was too strange, because there was a mailbox on the sidewalk there. The man just sat there. He didn't do anything. And I was kind of half turned in the seat so I could look at Dick, and I could see him out of the corner of my eye. When it was time to leave, Jean said that she was unfamiliar with the route home, so Dick told her to follow him. Well, we pulled out, I pulled out, the guy behind us pulled out. Moving up to the stoplight, turning left, Dick turned left, I turned left, the guy turned left. We go up 2 blocks and turn left again, and he did the same thing. Well, by this time, it's making me uncomfortable. So I moved to the middle lane. He moved to the middle lane. So I moved back, and he moved back. I only did it once, but that was enough to tell me that this man was definitely following us. At the next traffic light, Dick signaled for Jean to follow him onto the freeway. The man stayed close behind. For more than 10 miles, Jean said, the man shadowed her every move. And if I recall correctly, the path between the bar to where the shooting happens is a total of 11.8 miles. Dick was on the inside lane and I was on the outside lane, and somehow we got the guy between us but behind us, and I thought, all right, you rascal, I'm going to get you. So I slammed on my brakes. I'll be darned if he didn't slam on his brakes too. It was almost like he was reading my mind. I almost missed the turn, but he followed. This man was still behind me, so I followed Dick down the ramp. We made a right-hand turn. Dick just pulled over to the side of the road. I pulled up behind Dick, and I don't know why, in my mind, I just knew this guy would just go right on by and wave or something. He pulled right up behind us. And I don't know who was in more shock, Dick or me. So Dick walked back to the man and kind of leaned down, And he either said, "What are you doing?" or "What do you want?" I couldn't quite hear what he said. And the guy said something to him, and Dick goes, "What?" And the guy said something else to him, and then proceeded to point to the back of my car. At that point in time, Dick just stepped back, stood up, and raised his arm and said, "Get the blankety blank out of here." So I jumped back in my car, and I looked in my rearview mirror, and I hear pop, pop. Dick went down. As the gunman sped off, Jean got out of her car. I ran back to where Dick was, and his eyes were like half closed. And I tried to find the pulse on his neck, and it didn't look like he was breathing, so I started giving him mouth to mouth. Dick Hansen was shot twice, once in the chest and once in the neck. He never regained consciousness and was pronounced dead at the hospital. He left behind 2 daughters, aged 11 and 13. According to Detective Les Richards of the Sunnyvale, California Police Department, the authorities had trouble ascertaining a motive. As far as we know, Dick Hansen did not know his assailant. What makes this particular case extremely difficult is that most homicides boil down to common denominators of sex, money, or drugs, and network out from there. We have not been able to put this particular homicide in any of those categories so that we can develop a motive. However, police have come up with one possible theory about this case. Jean's personalized license plate read 49er Hugs. The killer had gestured toward her license plate while he was talking to Dick. Detective Richards wonders if the killer wasn't a crazed sports fan. Dick Hansen's physical stature was that of a football player, so we were looking into the theory of a disgruntled fan. At the time of the shooting, Jean described the suspect as white with a dark complexion. He wore eyeglasses with large black frames. In addition, the suspect's car looked like a 1970 Pontiac GTO Le Mans. It was a 2-door coupe with a dull faded light gray or blue paint job. Dick Hansen's killer remains at large. And here I've actually frozen an image from the Unsolved Mysteries episode of the car that they showed as a good example for what the car looked like. Now, interestingly, there's a few things that happened in the threads here at unsolved.com that I want to point out to you guys in the comments below. The first one is this comment from Mauricio Peralta. 1991, I happen to be working at National Semiconductor, and Richard Hansen, Dick, happens to be my coworker in the same department. Yeah, the news for all of us as in that department was defeated. I only wish that in my lifetime I would like to see this case solved. Rest in peace, Dick. I will remember you forever. And at the very bottom, one of the first comments to actually come in on this thread, a man named John Bond asked back in February of 2015, has the car ever been traced? Did Jean have the presence of mind to make a note of the stalker's number plate? Which totally makes sense to me, and it's something that I've been wondering ever since I started looking into this case as well. We have a reply here from someone that calls themselves Jean, and they say there was no license plate on the front of the car. Could that be the actual Jean? Possibly, and it would make sense if there was no license plate on the front of the car, that she might have not had an opportunity to see the license plate. The way that she talks about it, she was worried that she was going to get shot after Dick went down. So she's in her car, and she basically leans over so that she's out of the line of fire. She's worried at that point that he's going to walk up to the door, but he doesn't. He drives by. Now, because she's down basically kind of behind the console of the car, between the seat and the console, I doubt that she would have thought, I got to get that license plate, and popped up her head. I mean, she's literally worried for her life at that point. It's a shame that she couldn't, but if there was no license plate on the front, her opportunity to see the license plate on the back would have been literally a matter of a second or two as that car was driving by. The whole rest of the time, the car was behind them. And, even when she tried to hit her brakes, obviously they hit their brakes too. So she had no opportunity to actually see the back of the car. And what happened from the Unsolved Mysteries episode? Continuing with another article from the San Jose Mercury News, this one from March 12th, 1994. An NBC Unsolved Mysteries television dramatization last month has brought 150 calls from viewers who think they might have information that could help identify the killer. Captain Ken Howell of the Sunnyvale Public Safety Department said, "To call them leads would be overstating it. Efforts including laborious checking of more than 80,000 cars of the type described by the friend failed to turn up a solid lead. Howell says many of the calls received since the broadcast were such as, "Gee, I saw a guy who looked like that in Florida in 1989. I had a guy follow me one night," or "I worked with a guy one time who looked like that." A lot of these are not real easy to follow up on, Howell said. I guess it's pretty much what I anticipated. You're going to get some that are kind of worthless and some that are interesting, but you never know until you get into it if any of it really means anything, Howell said. Obviously, we're still talking about this case in 2019, and it has not been solved, so I would guess, I think pretty strongly to say that those 150 tips that were called in did not have the information that could lead investigators to this man, the man that shot Dick Hansen. Over at unsolvedmysteries.wikia.com, from the beginning, investigators have had trouble finding a suspect and a motive in the case. Gene and some investigators speculate that his stature resembling that of a football player and her license plate number, 49er Hugs, in reference to the San Francisco 49ers, might have gotten Dick killed by a fanatical fan of a rival team. Now, this is where the Dates from Hell episode gets really interesting for me. So, not being a huge sports fan and not really coming from Northern California, I don't have a whole lot of insight into what it's like in that area. I think that there's a lot of 49ers fans up there, but Mrs. BrainScratch, my wife, is from Northern California, and she had a bit of information to share with me about the culture. First of all, the Raiders, while they weren't in Northern California, they weren't playing for Oakland at that particular time, they did previously. They basically moved to Los Angeles from 1982 to 1994. And my wife says that they were still a culture of Raiders fans, and Raiders fans really didn't like 49ers very much. So could this just be a shooting involved specifically on a team hate situation? A lot of people just have trouble with this whole theory that it's someone from a rival team, like a fan of a rival team, that did this. What was really interesting about the interpretation done by Dates from Hell is they brought out a different aspect. And I don't know if this is a change in Jean's opinion or something that she just didn't think of relaying earlier on the previous coverage. But they actually show that someone in the restaurant mistakes Dick for a pro player, specifically a 49er. Now that kind of moves this all into a different direction. Now we're not just talking about someone that, oh, I'm a fan of this rival team. I see that this woman has a 49ers license plate. I want to shoot somebody. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But if this guy was in the restaurant, overheard that conversation thinking, hey, this is one of the pros, hey, this is a 49er, and when you couple that up with the fact that the person that Dick was being mistaken for could have been responsible for costing the 49ers a Super Bowl win, could that have been a reason for this man to shoot him? Now, I'm not enough of a football fan to know specifically about the players at that level. In the episode, they called the man Barry Hartman. I believe they made that name up because I'm trying to search for Barry Hartman as a 49er, and I'm finding nothing except references back to that show talking about that specific episode. I did run into some conversation threads over at sitcomsonline.com, and they bring up the possibility of a player named Harris Barton. And let me just bring up a photo of Harris here. Let me make it real big for you guys. So here is a photo of Harris. Does that potentially look like Dick Hansen? I got to say, I think it's a pretty close match, especially when you take a look at Harris Barton as he ages, as he gets a little older. Certainly, I do think that you can mistake these men. Here's a picture of them side by side. You guys tell me, could you mistake this guy for this guy? I think it's certainly possible. Now, once again, I don't know enough about football, but according to the sitcom threads online, I believe that this player Harris Barton might have been responsible for a play that lost a Super Bowl to the Bengals. If any of you guys know about that specific game, please drop it in the comments below. Please share that information with the rest of us. Is this completely off base? I really have no idea. I'm just telling you guys about the information that I've bumped into and the possibility that we've got two guys that look pretty similar. And could Dick have been mistaken for him? I think it's feasible. Could that be a reason for this man to have been shot if they did think it was Harris Barton and they did hold him responsible for losing the Super Bowl? Maybe they had some money put on that game. They lost a significant sum, something along those lines. That's certainly one of the theories that's being kicked around online. What about other potential theories on this case? Over at Web Sleuths, we have user Georgia Girl that had someone reach out to her that claims to have some inside information. They agreed to share that inside information, so we're going to review it here, but keep in mind this is basically anonymous. Hello, I realize this sounds random, but I do have some knowledge about the Dick Hansen murder. He was one of my dad's best friends at Santa Clara, so I know bits and pieces of the real story. First of all, the episode did not point out that Dick had in fact a reoccurring drug problem. I was surprised the detective did not mention it. And although some posts on the thread said he was mild-tempered, he had been a hothead in the past. My dad told me a story in college where he made fun of Dick, and Dick got so mad that he threw a shot put ball right by my dad's head. Not meaning to hit him, but to scare him. Obviously, getting hit in the head with a shot put could be deadly. So the idea that this man could have had something to do with Dick and his drug problem is pretty likely. In addition, it seems odd the way the girlfriend handled the situation. She was actually not that cooperative to the detectives right after the crime and changed her story a few times. It is obviously a tragic story, and I am sorry I cannot be much help to what you already know. I would ask one thing, please don't use my name. Hopefully I've been a little help. So wanted to share that with you guys. And then also later in the Web Sleuth thread, we have someone else kick in some information. Hi, my name is Julie, and Richard Hansen is my father. I joined the group so that I could post because I am overwhelmed with emotion that complete strangers would take note of my father's case and would be interested to help in any way. This case is very much cold, but if anyone has questions, recommendations, or anything that I could help with, please let me know. Otherwise, thank you again for showing such compassion through your interest and attention over the years. Very best regards, Julie Hansen. Now, interestingly, I don't know what happens with this thread, and admittedly, she's coming in here at 2013, and at this point, this thread is, a couple of posts a year. But it seems like, I don't know if the moderator is just kind of not on this thread anymore, but they're not reaching out to her to verify her identity. They have this thing with Web Sleuths where you can become a verified insider, and I'm not seeing that happen. Basically, no one seems to even reply to her. So I'm not sure what's happened in this particular instance with Web Sleuths. Admittedly, we're talking about a very, very cold case, but I'm really surprised that she wasn't verified and that people wouldn't come here and ask her more questions. Here's another comment from her. A couple years back, we had posted the Unsolved Mysteries clip to YouTube, and there were a lot of comments. Someone had posted that they knew who did it, and it had to do with my father purchasing drugs from someone and paying him with a wad of fake money as a joke. And it really irritated the person because it made him look bad, and so he had my father killed. The story actually sounded like something that my father would do. We had contacted the Sunnyvale Police Department, and they had said it was a dead lead. I'm not extremely confident that they exhausted all possibilities, but at the same time, I am a strong supporter of law enforcement and all their efforts early on in the case. They have limited resources, and I get it. Anyway, thanks again. Kind of interesting because even on those early articles, the family's talking about the fact that he was a prankster. And if this is his daughter, we have her kind of supporting that when she's saying this, saying, you know what, this does sound like something that my father might have done. So is it possible? Once again, keep in mind, he's hanging out at one of his favorite spots. If he did have dealers that he was dealing with, would he have possibly met up with them at that location for pickups? Maybe. Maybe the person knew that he would be there. Maybe the person knew his vehicle, saw his vehicle there, and waited. This adds a whole different dimension to this case. And it's interesting that we have kind of two separate points of information pointing us in the same direction. And it even answers kind of a question that's brought up by the detective that we read in one of the earlier articles. You know, he's saying, look, typically these murders come down to one of three things. It's sex, it's money, or it's drugs, and we can't figure out what this is. Well, here we have a message in 2014 kind of pointing us towards one of those buckets. So what do you guys think? So if you're interested in kind of looking into that aspect more, I have another link to Sitcoms Online down below. There is a whole board almost specifically about this one topic. They have essentially taken the Web Sleuth's post from John, pasted it in there, and there are 10 pages of conversation with people debating about this particular angle to the case. On top of that, I have a Reddit thread that you can check out down below. And once again, here is the police sketch. Who is this guy? What is this story? Why did he shoot this man at the side of the road? Why did he terrorize a woman for 11 miles? A lot of questions, not a lot of answers, and there's just not a lot of press on this case anymore. I'm telling you guys, I had to work really hard just to pull together what I could find for today's episode. I'm hoping that by putting this out there, putting this on YouTube, we're kind of a blip to reignite some more awareness of this case. It's strange because you look in all these conversation threads, everyone remembers this case, but you go looking for articles on this case and there is just nothing. I've literally showed you guys everything I've been able to find out there. If you find some other stuff that isn't in the links down below, please include it in the comments down below so the rest of us could follow up on that as well, maybe get a bit of a better understanding here. But we've got 2 kids that don't know what happened to their father. We've got a woman that was romantically involved with this man, trying to find justice. Do you have the answer? If you do, I've got contact information for Sunnyvale. They don't call it the police department. They call it the Public Safety Department, but I've got that contact information in the description box below. Please send that information in. This case, it's a tip away from being solved. Someone has to have heard something. Someone has to have seen something when it comes to this man, what he did around that time. Did he start acting weird? Did he miss days from work? Maybe he bragged to someone about the fact that he killed a 49er. Maybe he was expecting to see that pop up in the news the next day, and all of a sudden he's saying it wasn't a 49er, it was someone else. I don't know. But it is an interesting aspect of this case when you consider that he left Jean behind. He essentially had someone that was an eyewitness to him shooting somebody, and he left her behind. It really seems like the focus of this murder was Dick. And was it because this guy thought he was a 49er, or is it something else? Is there possibly some drug connection here? Some other mechanism of money involved here? A lot to consider. What do you guys think? Let's talk about it in the comments down below. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of BrainScratch. I appreciate each and every one of you out there that spends your time with me. Have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you back here on Monday on the Lord and Arts channel.